Hello, folks. I don't think people will be able to turn off their cameras or turn on their cameras unless I allow it. I think.
hmm Yeah, I think
Okay.
for mic and for video, yeah, with the webinar
Okay.
style. Yeah.
Um, which I might leave until Q&A. Not that I don't want to see everyone's beautiful faces. Or,
Yeah. I think too with the chat and the Q&A feature,
mm-hmm.
if people wanted to like capture stuff as
Yeah.
it's going along, yeah.
Good morning. I'm just typing a little message. And I believe, is this recording? Okay, it is. Great. Um, Let me give it a few more minutes to let folks trickle in. I haven't used the Q&A feature in a long time. And of course, this will be recorded, so if folks aren't able to show up, I understand. It is a busy, I feel like every year, every time of year is a busy time of year, but particularly this year, and particularly right now. Um, Peachum Greens, should I call you? Do you just want to be referred to as Peachum or Greens, or do you want to? I assume there's another name behind the business name, but whatever's comfortable. I can't hear you, but our audio is turned off for guests. Hi, Eric. Um, Audio and video is turned off for guests at the moment. That's like the default in the system. But during the Q&A at the end, I'll figure out how to open up everything so that folks can talk. Great. Awesome. We should have a few more participants, but let me just do a quick check. I once had a webinar where for some reason the link that I had and the link that everyone else had were different. And so I gave it to an empty room thinking no one arrived. And apparently they were all trying to get in. So I just want to make sure that that's not happening. I don't
Yeah,
think so,
that would
though.
be good.
It's so sad. Okay, great. Okay, I figured out how I can let everybody chat at the end. Okay, I'm not getting any emails, so I'm just gonna assume we can get started if as folks hop in. I may not spot them, Lily, um, just because of the screen sharing.
Yeah, I can
Um,
always if people have questions
okay,
once they pop in, or yeah, I don't know how it works with that message you put at the top of the chat, but I can always reiterate that if like a big group of people come
great,
in.
great.
Yeah.
And if there's a question that's like emergent,
Yeah, yeah.
feel free to pop in and stop me. That's totally fine. Okay, I guess I'm gonna go ahead and get started. Welcome, folks, to the Farm to Institution Market Development Grant Applicant webinar. I am Madison. I am the grant manager for this program, and with me is Lily. They will be the web grants guru to overseeing everything on that side. As folks trickle in, please feel free to either introduce yourselves in the chat or just hang out. At the end, I will turn on everyone's cameras and audio so that we can do a Q&A. Just a quick overview. Again, we'll give you a brief agenda after this slide, but you are welcome to use the raise hand function if there's some sort of emergent question. But we will have a Q&A at the end. Definitely recommend you type your questions in the chat. Lily will be sort of monitoring that and able to assist as needed. And we are recording this session for later viewing, so you can always go back as needed. So we're going to go over the program, so why Farm Institution and what the purpose of this program is, and then we're going to also go over grant details, which is probably why you're here, to talk about eligibility, match requirements, payment schedule, and just what this grant can look like depending on who the applicant is. And then we're going to go through a how to apply process, breaking down the various parts of the application as we go, and then Lily will provide a web grants tutorial for anyone who has not utilized it yet. And then again, we'll have some time at the end for a Q&A. So why farm to institution? So in 2011, the Vermont legislature gave funding to the Agency of Agriculture for the creation of the local, at the time it was called the Vermont Local Food Market Development Program, basically focusing on institutional and wholesale development. And then in 2023, this program was renamed to what it is today, Farm to Institution Market Development Grant, to emphasize a focus on developing institutional markets for local food. So this program is really focused on encouraging market development opportunities with an institutional focus across the state. And so why institutions? In general, we're looking at ensuring that Vermonters in schools, hospitals, colleges, correctional facilities, anything you can think of, have access to nutritious, locally grown food. This is also a really large market that can increase opportunities for local farmers. And by leveraging the purchasing power of a high volume, predictable meal program, like at a college or a school or a nursing home, it allows farms to increase the viability of the work that they're doing because they can rely on larger orders. And then we're also hoping to have that sort of farm to school, farm to institution link where we're promoting agricultural literacy and community connection. This grant purpose is to improve Vermont food producers' access to institutional markets and to increase the quantity of local food available in institutions. This is done by addressing barriers to the supply chain. Projects in this grant, successful projects tend to be collaborative proposals that focus on developing or deepening sales relationships and really on procurement for institutions serving meals to Vermont residents. Really competitive proposals will demonstrate a high likelihood of long-term sustained partnerships. So we're really looking at how can we improve farmers' access and food producers' access to institutional markets over a long period of time, and how can we make sure that those relationships are maintained so that the quantity of local food available in Vermont institutions continues. This is not an exhaustive list, but it's a good one to just keep in mind. An institutional market will include things like colleges and universities, schools, so K through 12 programs, early childhood programs, correctional facilities, nursing homes, and hospitals and healthcare providers. Things like, for example, we had someone reach out asking about Meals on Wheels. Meals on Wheels would be considered an institutional program because it does provide sort of an intermediary approach to healthcare and sort of assisted living. So there's some wiggle room here. And so if anyone has any questions about whether a market they're looking at getting into or supporting is an institutional market, you are more than welcome to reach out and we can talk through it. So the nitty-gritty of the grant, who can apply? Farm and food businesses, producer groups or associations, and supply chain facilitators. So we're talking about Like obviously farm and food businesses, if you are creating food using Vermont products and creating a Vermont product, you are included in that. Producer groups or associations, so any group that focuses on helping a larger number of producers. So the Vermont Veg and Berry Growers Association is the one that always comes to mind for me, but there are dozens throughout the state. And supply chain facilitators, so food hubs, nonprofits, that can even include food distributors. So anyone who's looking at taking food from farmers and producers and giving it to other locations. Awards will range from 10,000 to 30,000, and we have 30,000 total available to grant. So that means around 1 to 3 grants will be awarded this year. In previous years, that's roughly the same number. Project length can last up to 2 years. Projects will start in January 2026 and have to end by January 2028. Doesn't mean you have to take 2 years, but it does give you that amount of time to make that work. We have a matching fund requirement, so 25% of the grant request amount must be matched. That can be cash, which can be grants. We'll go over this a little bit more, but it can be grants or loans or donations or just cash in the bank, or it can be in-kind goods and services, so labor, volunteer work, equipment that you already are getting, that sort of thing. And then the application deadline is October 31st at 1:59 p.m. That is a system number that we have, so we cannot accept applications after that point in time. So definitely plan ahead. And I often recommend trying to submit maybe on October 30th, just in case anything comes up. I also recognized while I was going over this presentation today that there aren't any examples of previous grants that have been successful in this program. So I just wanted to give a quick list of examples of previous successfully funded grants, so you can kind of get an idea of the scope of what this funding has gone towards. So we've had a food hub but upgrade their software to improve the route planning that was aimed at improving local food sales through their K through 12 summer food service. So that was a infrastructure upgrade that they did that let them provide better efficiency in their delivery process. And they also completed a third-party food certification supported by this grant that allowed them to become an approved vendor for Sodexo. So they were able to access Sodexo-based markets through that process. A nonprofit last year collaborated with bakeries on sourcing local flour for their K-12 specific products, and also supported schools in purchasing local flour and local flour-based products. And they really worked on building that collaboration between schools and producers and really focused on getting more local Vermont flour into local Vermont institutions. In 2024, we had a grantee that partnered with the Department of Corrections to increase procurement of local Vermont food. They did that by doing a lot of data analysis, looking at current buying trends and identifying areas where there was room for increased Vermont sourcing. And then they also worked with farmers and producers to learn the new state of Vermont procurement system, Vermont VT Buys, which was identified as a potential barrier to being able to get into the Department of Corrections and other state institutions. In 2023, we had two sort of food hub, food distributor grantees that they used this grant money as personnel costs to cover individuals who were focused exclusively on, or at least part of the project was part of their job description was focused on institutional sales and increasing institutional sales and deepening those relationships. And also through, streamlining the vendor processes and just improving the vendor experience. And then we have, in terms of farms that have received these grants, farms and food producers have used these funds to improve their product labels, so make food more easily accessible by federal meal programs, which have labor requirements. A bakery used the funds to install mid-scale manufacturing equipment and create a new product assembly line, which allowed them to make way more product and develop larger product lines so that they were able to not only buy more grains and beans from local farmers and increase the amount of grains and beans planted, but also increase local institutional buyers for their shelf-stable goods. And finally, we had a egg producer upgrade their egg washing and handling facilities, especially their storage, which allowed them to both increase production and increase the amount they could store and the length of time they could store, which made their product more accessible to institutional buyers in large enough numbers. So hopefully that gives a good overview of the sorts of projects that this funding can support and sort of the variety that you can approach this with. Like I said before, eligibility is Vermont farm and food businesses, producer groups or association, and supply chain facilitators. Eligible projects will increase sales for at least one Vermont farm and increase amount of local food served in Vermont institutions. It's not listed on this slide, but these documents aren't required in the application, but you will need to be able to give a certificate of insurance listing the state of Vermont as an additional insured and an IRS form W-9. So those just might be eligibility elements that affect you, and just wanted you to know that in advance. In terms of costs, these funds can be used to cover personnel, supplies, equipment, stipends. Equipment can include things like software. It can be pretty flexible, but ineligible costs are vehicle purchases, land purchases, and any purchases made prior to award notification. So if you have a piece of equipment that you purchased this year, that would not be eligible for this grant. And again, if you have any questions about eligibility of cost, eligibility of a project, please reach out to me. I'll have my email at the end of this presentation, so I'm happy to talk through what that looks like and answer any questions you have. And now I'm just going to do a quick run through of the application components and kind of break down what you'll be looking at whenever you apply. This number 1 here, applicant information and project description and impact. Those are fairly self-explanatory, so I don't have slides on those, but it's all about sharing both your organization or business as well as any collaborators that you will have along the process, as well as giving an overview of your project and what you're hoping to achieve and the impact you hope it will have. But you'll be asked to provide some goals, performance measures, and expected outcomes. This is something that helps us track that your project is successful and helps you understand sort of the impact that your project is going to have. So for example, a goal would be to sell more local potatoes to existing school customers. A performance measure for that would be an increase in the pounds of potatoes purchased monthly. And your expected outcome will be an estimate based on how much you think you'll be able to increase that goal. So in this case, this example, hospital purchases 100 pounds more potatoes per month in comparison to the prior year. These are the sorts of things that a grant, that a lot of, a technical assistance provider can help develop. If you are interested in any information on that, please feel free to reach out. But that will be expected that you'll have at least a few of these in your grant application. You'll also be expected to provide a project work plan, which is essentially a timeline. Oops, sorry, this says January 2027. That is not true. It's January 2028. Sorry, that was a leftover from a previous year. But you'll want to enter at least 5 project activities into the project work plan table. So essentially 5 points in your timeline. You can enter more than that. I don't know if there's actually a limit on the number that you can enter, but they do have 1,000-character limit per field. You'll be asked to provide a budget. Obviously, if you have something that falls under this table, great. If you, for example, don't have benefits or supplies, that's okay. You'll just put a 0. For each expense, you'll want to provide details and purpose, and that you'll want to provide details about the project costs in the details and purpose column, and also make sure that you're accounting for the 25% matching fund requirement. We want to see where that match fund is coming from. Matching funds don't need to be secured at the time of application, but they must be secured by the grant's start date. So if you have a loan, for example, that is pending, that would need to be starting before we could actually launch your grant. Just a little bit more detail about matching funds. Like I said, they must be 25% of the grant request amount. We have a lot of discussion here internally about what 25% means. And in this case, it means if your grant request is 20% or is $20,000, you'll be providing $5,000 in match for a total project cost of $25,000. This can be higher. It doesn't have to just be $5,000 for the match, but you need to have at least that much. Your match can be cash or in kind. Some examples of cash match would include funds in the bank, funds contributed by another organization, so like a collaborator, or a grant that you've received, bank loans, applicant labor, and compensation of employees. So if you are using your labor rate or your time, that is allowable as a cash match, but just make sure they're in line with current market rates. So a reasonable labor rate per hour of work. And then example of in-kind matches includes goods or services provided during the grant period for which no expenditure is made. So for example, pro bono work, volunteer labor, donated supplies. In-kind contribution must be made during the grant agreement period and be directly related to the project. You'll also have an opportunity to provide some optional supporting documentation. So letters of support or commitment are optional. We don't require them, but they can improve the competitiveness of your application. So a letter of commitment or support could include a local community partner explaining your experience, or a commitment from an institutional buyer in Vermont to increase, or saying they have the capacity to purchase the increased goods that you are looking at developing. So if you say, we want to increase the hospital's purchase of potatoes by 25%, the hospital saying they are able to do that is really helpful. Or it could even be a Vermont food producer highlighting the interest in growing for larger markets. So if you are saying that you are hoping to increase the amount of grains, for example, grown in Vermont, having support from a grain producer would be awesome. You are also welcome to provide other supporting documentation, which might include things like professional cost estimates, so large quotes from contractors or consultants. You can include your business plan if this is something that you think will impact your long-term growth. Testimonials or quotes from employers or employees or customers. And then you can also supply sort of stories or supporting documentation around how these investments will improve your enterprise's ability to serve institutional markets in Vermont. When all applications are in and ready to go, they'll be reviewed by a committee, which will include representatives from the Agency of Agriculture, Food and Markets, and then a few other food system stakeholders. Scoring criteria below will be used to review the process, and there's a much more detailed rundown of this in the request for applications. There's a much more detailed rundown of all of these slides in the request for applications, so please make sure you review that. But the largest portion of your score will be market development goals and performance measures. So the actual impact that you're going to, the actual product and impact that you're going to have, your methodology and timeline, and then your budget and your experience will be considered for up to 10 points each, in basically looking at reasonability of budgets and your sort of qualifications on ensuring that this project can be completed. Payment schedule, really helpful just to make sure that you are aware of how this timeline works. When an award is granted, the first payment is a 40% of the award, a total at the very beginning. So you can hit the ground running and start with some cash up front. This will be after you submit all your documentation and set up a direct deposit if you'd like, and you sign your grant agreement. And then a year later, after a status report, you're able to claim another 40% of the award. And then in 30 days after your grant ends, or so that can be in February 2028, but that could theoretically be sooner if your project is a little shorter, then you'll be able to claim up to 20% of the final award. We are a reimbursement-based grant program, so you'll be asked to provide financial receipts, et cetera, to ensure that we're covering actual costs. But then if you say you're awarded $10,000, if you only spent $8,000 of that, you would only receive $8,000 from the state of Vermont. How to apply? This is the fun part. So you can visit our page on this grant on our website. There you'll find the request for application, and that will include all these details and way, way more. It'll also include a link to Web Grants, which is the application portal that you're going to hear about here shortly. You'll get a link to our Web Grants application guide, which is really helpful if this is your first time navigating it. And I'll also make sure that this webinar recording is up there as well. Once you have your wits about you and you're ready to go, you can go to WebGrants to start working on your application. There you'll be able to sort of work on it as you go and save as you go. Definitely recommend starting as soon as possible. And then if you haven't registered for WebGrants, if your organization doesn't have an account or you don't have an account for your organization, please register as soon as possible. It can take a couple days to go through that process. And then you want to apply by Friday, October 31st, spooky Halloween time, um, by 1:59 p.m. And then go trick-or-treating afterwards, maybe. All right, it is Lily's time to shine. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and Lily is going to take over.
Awesome. Thank you, Madison. Yeah, hi
Yeah, of
folks.
course.
I'm Lily Bradburn, they, them pronouns. I am a grants and contract specialist with the Agricultural Development Division in the Agency of Ag. So I support both Farm to Institution, which sort of is nestled under the Farm to School program, as well as the Working Lands Enterprise Initiative. And as Madison said, all things web grants. And then if folks receive the award, I help with the more technical side of the actual granting process. So yeah, just hopping right off of that last slide that Madison had. So this is kind of the nice starting point for when you go to apply, with links to all the necessary documentation, including the application guide, and then actually what registering for registering for web grants. That's a good tongue twister. The other thing I'll put in the chat here is actually a guide that I think maybe we can find a way to get into this page as well, which is actually just a how-to guide for registering. So it goes through and it'll show you just nice step-by-step screenshots of how to go through that process. And this is the registration page itself. And so first thing from the outset with web grants, I'll say, is anything that's red and has an asterisk next to it is required information. So that's what you want to be filling out. And highly, highly recommend, like Madison said, to register ahead of time. Give yourself plenty of time to get acquainted with web grants as a system. So you would fill this out with two sets of information, both your personal contact information and then also the information for the organization that is applying for this grant. So I always like to highlight to folks, whatever organization you would like to hold the fiscal responsibility, the grant agreement responsibility for this project at the end of the day, should it be awarded. That's how you want to fill this out for. So once you send that in, it takes, again, 2 business days to get this process, and then you're going to get 2 separate emails. One is going to have your username, and then one has a temporary password. And then what you can do is go to the login page for web grants. And one of the things I like to point out is that my contact information is all right here on this login page. So if you ever have any issues, it's right there to get in touch with me. This is also the starting point for if you were to register. So you click that and it brings you to that page that I was just showing you. So once you get your login information for the first time, you can sign in, and web grants will bring you to this main work assignment kind of hub of the page. The first thing I'll point out is on the left-hand side is this My Profile. You want to select that. And then there's a blue button here for resetting your password. I always just recommend that when you get your temporary password, to change one that you can familiarize yourself with. And then to actually begin the application itself, you go to the Funding Opportunities tab on the left-hand side. And this will actually list all current posted Farm to School, Agricultural Development Division, all of the current grants, funding opportunities that are underway. So you would want to look specifically for the local food market development and the FY26 Farm to Institution Market Development Grant. And so once you select that, this brings you to the funding opportunities details page. This is, again, just like a reiteration of all the same information that's available in the RFA that's in this webinar, but it just gives it to you in a different location. So you can run through, look at some of the description information here. And then there is also included in here some website links. So again, a link to that main page where I started us off, the web grants application guide, and this will give you a really nice, again, step-by-step screenshot if you're sort of more guide focused person. This will provide you with an opportunity of how you can actually, how you can actually start your application. And then as well, a link to the RFA. So really just reiterating a lot of the same information. And then when you want to start your application, there's this green Start New Application in the right-hand corner. And this is just gathering the first initial information for the application. So application title, I would recommend finding some unique title. I know sometimes, folks might just put like, this is in progress, or they might just put their org's name and application, but I would give it a unique title. This helps with our review panel as they're going through the reviewed applications to make sure that they see a unique title to associate with the organization. We're just going to put test. And then the primary contact. So this is just going to be who you want to have the primary contact information attached with this application. And so you would just see most likely just your name. And so you just want to double check that you're the primary contact on there. And then once you save, a couple more fields will populate. And then this for organization, again, like I said, the organization that you want attached with this project to have the main responsibility. So if you are someone who happens to support a lot of other organizations and you've been registered in web grants before, you might see that there's multiple organizations listed here. So you just want to make sure you're selecting the organization specifically for this funding opportunity. And then the last thing you can do here, and this is optional, so you'll see that it's got the black text next to it, is you can add additional contacts. So if you're working with partners together to work on this application, you could add those folks in. So for instance, I can just put myself with this tester account to be someone who can access the application to upload documentation or fill in different portions of the application that are relevant. And so then you'll save. And so this brings you to the main hub for the application itself. The first thing you might notice is that there's this big red bar that says the application can't be submitted currently. And that's just because all pieces of it have not been filled out. One thing that I will sort of point out about web grants is it has, a couple of checks and balances to make sure that you filled out everything that is needed within the application. So each of these is a component of the application itself. And what you want to do is you want to fill out each section to the best of your ability, and then you will mark those sections as complete. And I'll show you how to do that, always saving whatever you're working on. And once you mark it as complete, you'll see this green check mark. So that general information, that's what we just filled out. And we've saved all that information. And so it's marked it as complete. And so once you have green check marks all the way down the line, then you'll get a nice big green bar that says the application's in compliance and you can submit it. And then the final thing that you want to do is actually hit the submit button. So that will pop up over here in this section. You'll see a green button that says submit application. And so that's kind of the final step. Sometimes folks will forget that. They'll see all these green check marks and the green bar and they're like, great, I'm good to go. But actually submitting it, make sure that it sends it over to Madison, send it to the folks that you will be reviewing. So I'm just going to go through, point out a couple of different aspects of utilizing web grants to fill out this application, just some eccentricities that I like to point out. The first of which is that it's best to use the internal navigation within web grants. And so what I mean by that is, browsers, whether it's Chrome, Edge, what have you, obviously have refresh buttons and back buttons. I highly recommend not using those just because sometimes it doesn't always translate back to the page that you want to be at, and you don't ever want to be in a situation where maybe you hadn't saved information, or maybe that wasn't the part of the application you wanted to go to and you're accidentally in the wrong spot. So Web Grants has a back button that you can utilize, and then there's always different tabs or sections that you can select to navigate within Web Grants. So that's just the first thing that I will point out. And then these different components, like I said, are the different sections of the application as listed in the RFA. So the first one is this global application form. Every funding opportunity within Agricultural Development Division has this as its sort of standard initial form that everyone fills out. So this is the section that you could start off with to fill out that just asks for some information. what I wanted to point out in particular is that at the end of this section is some voluntary demographic information. This is an anonymous form that exists in a separate location within Microsoft Forms. And so you're not filling this out within Web Grants. And so it has a link right here. And what, excuse me, what I recommend with anytime you're clicking a link within Web Grants is that you actually right click and select open link in new tab. Or you can hit the control button and select it. Because sometimes it will just try and open it right in the same window as the Web Grants application. And again, you don't want to be in a situation where maybe you hadn't saved information and suddenly you're getting booted out of Web Grants. So this will bring up this applicant demographic survey that, again, I said voluntary and anonymous. So it's a separate form. And so in this case, if you had filled out all of this information in here, you can hit Save Form. And it'll kind of give you a high level static version of, okay, this is what you filled out so far. And you'll see these Mark as Complete buttons. So once you filled out all the information to the best of your ability, again, filled out any section that is red with an asterisk, you want to hit Mark as Complete. So in this case, it's telling me, you haven't filled out actually the required information. And so there's some missing data. So if this were to all be complete, it would actually kick you back to this application list tab at the top, and you would get this green check mark. So again, that's sort of going through the different steps of how to fully complete the application components. As you save the form, you mark it as complete, and then you want to make sure you have the green check mark, and at the end of all of it, that green bar. And then I'm going to point out just a couple other sections. Let's see. Okay. So there's kind of two unique things happening in this applicant information tab. The first is that we have a lot of questions that are conditional, meaning depending on a response, you might get more fields that pop up. These are all listed within the RFA itself, but within Web Grants, it'll only show up ones in which, depending on how you respond, will come up. So in this case, we have some conditional questions asking, are you applying as a farm or food business? So if you were to say yes, it would populate several other questions to fill out. And the unique thing about these, kind of just a quirky thing with Web Grants, some of these are required questions, even though they're not highlighted in red. So I like to point this out to folks. So if I were to try and fill this out and then hit save, you have two other fields that come up as saying this field is required. So Web Grants will always tell you, like, before you go to save something, oh, there's a field that is required that's missing information. And so you'll need to fill it out. So just a quirky thing I like to point out. If you go to fill this out and you're like, oh, actually, this was the wrong question, you can just delete that information and just hit no. And it'll just bring it back to showing none of those fields. The second, again, kind of quirk with Web Grants. So part of this section, you can fill in project partners if that is relevant to your project in question. And you fill out as a table. So you input information, it'll show as a table. The first thing you have to do a lot of times when you see these sort of blank tables where it says no table or no data for table is just select Save Multi-List. And what that'll do is, again, it kind of brings up the static information of what you filled out so far. But then now you have these add row buttons. And then you can input the actual information that you're looking to put in and hit save. And then it will actually pop up as a row. And that directions are also listed here as well. And then once you say maybe you filled out a couple of items in the table and you want to go back and make some edits, you can actually hit edit all rows, and we'll actually show you the information as an actual table that you can go and fill out that information. So this first form kind of has a couple of quirky things that I like to point out, along with, no, not this one. So the goals, performance measures, and expected outcomes, again, is one of those tables. This shows up, it allows you to have the add row, so you can just add the row, but it does require at least 3 goals. So if you were to fill this out and just put 1 row and just save and mark as complete, it would actually come up and say you still need a minimum of 3 rows, meaning 3 goals, performance measures, and expected outcomes. And then similarly, there's another table here with information on the project work plan. And again, where you're adding in the information that's being asked as a table. And then for the budget table, this is actually a pre-filled table in terms of the information it's asking for. And so you'll want to go through and then just any information that's relevant, as Madison said, fill in, the grant request amount, any matching funds, and then give any details or purpose. And then you can just save the grid. So this is sort of pre-populated with the different fields you need to fill in. And then just using the back buttons within Web Grants, there is the supporting optional documentation. This allows for adding attachments, and here you would select file. This would bring up your computer's internal file system. You could find, whatever documentation you're looking to upload and then select it, and it would upload it here as an attachment. And then the final piece that I'll show, again, this is a required piece of documentation for every Agricultural Development Division grant is a state water quality compliance certification. So you would want to make sure you go through and fill out the questions it's asking here, and then you would actually need to upload the document itself, and we provide a link to a blank template document. So again, hitting Control, selecting it, or right-click, open link in tab, this will bring you to a blank version of that good standing certification. So you'll want to download this, fill it out. Sometimes folks, if they e-sign it, tend to have some issues. So just making sure once you actually save this and go to upload it, that the signature has saved through all the way to the end. I know that sometimes the signature can be wonky with PDFs. So this is just that final bit of documentation that you'll need to upload for this application. And then, as I said, you want to make sure you go through, you're saving everything, you're marking everything as complete, you get all of these green check marks, and then definitely making sure at the end, once you've got the green bar, that you hit to mark as complete. Something that folks just sometimes miss. If you're in the midst of that application, you've saved a couple of pieces and you want to come back to it, there's two different ways you can do that. You can either navigate back from, say, login in your dashboard. So you've just logged in. There's two other ways you can get in. So you can do the funding opportunities. Again, you can go to that Farm to Institution Market Development Grant, and you would just find the application that you had already started. And then you can hit Edit Application, and it would bring you right back to this page. Or you could select applications from when you logged in, and then you could search through. We have a lot listed here because this is our testing environment, but you could search through for the Farm to Institution application and just find the one in particular that you're looking for. So just two different ways to access the application. And yeah, I believe that is it. Unless there's anything else, Madison, you can think of that you'd want to point out.
No, that's great. That was one of the better reviews I've ever seen of web grants. It's it can be a quirky system, but it's really helpful for us. And so there's definitely, if you encounter something, Lily can get you back to rights as well.
Yeah. And so Monday through Friday, 7:45 to 4:30, if folks need me. And yeah, we'll just totally reiterate, as Madison said, accessing web grants way ahead of time, getting yourself registered, familiarize yourself with the application long before the deadline, just to make sure if anything comes up, that if it's a technical web grants thing, that I'm available to help folks out with navigating that.
Awesome. Well, with that in mind, we are on to the Q&A, and I think I can go here and I can allow people to turn on their cameras and unmute themselves. There we go. So if either of you have any questions, hello. Nice to see your face. Hi folks. If you have any questions, please feel free. If not, that's also okay. And if you would rather reach out directly and set up a chat or ask any questions via email, we can also do that as well.
I had one question. Hi, I'm
Mhm.
Devin with Vermont Youth Conservation Corps.
Hi.
Hi. I was wondering if so our vision for this grant is to apply to expand on programming that we're already doing, to be
Mhm.
a little bit more like supplying for directly to institutions. So would our if we're applying for, let's say, 20,000, would we have to be showing that that 20,000 is new incurred costs, or could this grant be going towards like salaries or stipends that would already be part of our programmatic budget without this grant? Does that question make sense?
It does. As long as the work that as long as the work that's being covered is specific to this grant, like obviously we understand that institutions will or organizations will uh already be planning to pay their employees a certain amount and then, divert uh energies and focuses depending on the projects that they have in store. So yeah, so if you have someone who's already on salary, but you want to utilize some of their work time for the specific project, that's totally okay, and that could be covered under that. You would just need to, explain that and explain where the work time and energy is going. Does
Mhm.
that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hi, this is Eric, he, him, his. I have a question with regards to another grant. It's the Farm to School program, and the
hmm
schools are an institution. How does your grant link with them? And how is NOFA involved in this? I mean, does any of this resonate? Like, how does it all come together?
So the State of Vermont Agency of Agriculture has a farm to institution director. Her name's Gina.
Right.
She used to run this program, and I'm just taking it over for her to help out a little bit because there's a lot of things going on in Farm to School, which is awesome. And so this is generally under that umbrella of farm to institution. So it is farm to school, but because it also is looking at, hospitals, Department of Corrections, et cetera, it differentiates from a lot of the other work that she's doing in that way.
Right.
This is all legislative funds, so this has been a line item in the Vermont legislature since 2011. And so it is completely and fully directed by Agency of Ag. So there's no involvement with outside partners. NOFA has actually received one of these grants before, but is not sort of involved in the development of this particular project. Does that answer your two questions? I want to make sure that.
No, 100%. Okay.
Okay,
No,
great.
great. And the second question I have is what we're seeing here in Peacham is, and it was prompted by our very small farm. We sold 100 lettuce to CCSU, and this is what
hmm
gave us the idea as we moved through the process. And then the conversation extended to talking about our food shed here. We have a lot of small scale producers who might not be well suited.
Uh-oh. Everyone else, is he frozen for everyone else too? Okay. Okay, I just want to make sure. Oh no, Eric. Okay. I'm just gonna type in the chat real quick, just to make sure. Um, Good old Vermont internet.
No, can't live with it, can't live without it.
No. Hopefully he can come back and finish this. I feel like he was just getting to the meat of his question, and it
I
was going to be a good
know.
one. So,
Could you just,
um,
do you have any info on past volume of applications and what you might expect this year?
it does vary year to year. Typically we're seeing in the we're talking about tens of applications. We're not talking about hundreds of applications.
Got it. Okay.
And anywhere from, I think the smallest that I know of was maybe 5 or 6, and the highest I know of was maybe 12 or 15. It's a long running program, so it kind of varies. And in some years we have more funding because shifting money around.
Yep.
Or like, previous applicants didn't, but 1 year someone may not end up being able to do their project, so their funds are deobligated and then passed along. So that also dictates some stuff as well. But usually over the past 5 years, we've had anywhere, but it's 1 to 3 recipients in general. Usually 2 seems to be the general approach. And sort of how things work out. Obviously, if someone has a $30,000 project and it's excellent, that is totally valid. And if we have 3 $10,000 projects, that's also great.
Do you partially award grants? So let's say you have a really strong $30,000 application, a really strong 20. Do you split the difference and give both 15?
That really depends kind of on the grant and the situation at the time. Hi again, Eric. I'll wrap up this answer real quick and then we can pop back to yours. We try not to sort of arbitrarily do partial funding. Typically, if the Agency of Ag does a partial fund, it's because they have some extra money left over and it makes sense to try and support an additional grant. That's to say that's not impossible that would happen, but it would be a much longer conversation with the potential grantees on whether that project was still viable with a lesser amount, because we tend to try and believe the applicant when they say that they need X amount of money.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Eric, you want to try again?
Yes, apologies. I'll land the plane quicker. So with our small producer farm collective, about 5 or 6 farms in Peacham, this is a question of the mechanics of the application. So if I'm spearheading it and I have 5 or 6 other small producers who are wanting to create a farm aggregation or producer aggregation to strengthen our food shed here, and then go direct into institutions, either it be the Peacham Elementary School, a program with a rural edge development that's coming in here, daycare, the penitentiary, the hospital, etc. How do I apply with 5 different farms or businesses? How does that work? Have you seen that before, when a farm aggregation team is going for this grant?
Yeah, we definitely see a lot of different sort of shapes to applicants. So there's a couple ways you could approach this, sort of depending on where you are in your process. If you're thinking that this is going to be like an independent entity that sort of is like an umbrella partnership, that would be something that it might be worth, and maybe Lily, and that might be a question that Lily and I could talk about too. It might be worth sort of applying as that umbrella organization.
Right.
And then listing all of the farms as partners. But if you're kind of spearheading this and it's still in the early stages and you're not sure what it's actually going to look like, but you're all going to be working together on this, you or any other farm could apply and then list those farms as partner organizations. There is a space on the application to actually list out all of the folks you're engaged with.
Okay. Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think too, when folks are sort of going in as partners, the thing, we like to emphasize is if someone is awarded, to think about, who would provide a W-9 and a certificate of insurance to hold that fiscal responsibility. So who would be able to make claims for reimbursement and, provide all of that information, I think is sort of what we like to highlight to folks. If they're going more as a collective versus like thinking of sort of a singular entity they might want to create wholesale new, is just, which of those partners is going to hold that responsibility. And then that's usually the good person to at least have that organization, that business be the applicant.
Well said. Okay, great.
Yeah, the limitations of web grants are really around, like web grants is looking at how do we read your application and then award you the money. And that's sort of how you should view it. The sort of more fluid dynamics of the behind the scenes stuff is a lot easier for the reviewers to sort of process and understand. So that what you described is something that they're totally ready to review and understand. But yeah, that's a good question for web grants being what web grants is. There's going to be some limitations.
Okay, perfect. No, that was great.
Awesome. Any other questions before we wrap up here? Great. And I'm totally happy to, like I said, you visit our website just to, grab any more additional information. Make sure you read the RFA. It's really, really helpful. But if you have any questions or just want clarification, please feel free to reach out to me. And I am happy to help. If you have a problem with web grants, definitely reach out to Lily. They know more than I do.
I might have
Lily-
missed it during the presentation or when my
Mhm.
internet wonked out, which it looks like it's doing. And this wonderful presentation that has the contacts. I saw another PDF that went through the whole web grant for this, but is this PDF available somewhere, or this PowerPoint?
This PowerPoint, so the recording here will be uploaded to our website in the next
Okay.
day or two. And
Perfect.
then also that when you're on that website, the link on the screen, there is a link to a what is it called on the, it's number 4 on how to apply is
Yes.
there's an application guide. So
Okay, great.
that will walk you through that as well.
Thank you.
Awesome. Well, if no, is there other questions? I'm happy to let you guys go. Again, feel free to reach out if you have anything that comes up, and I look forward to seeing your applications.
Thank you so much
Thank
for your
you.
time.
Yeah.
Thank you
very
guys.
much.
I see you all. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.